A Master's Tale 8. At the beginning of this talk, this series of talks, I outlined percentages, the number of people in each category. These categories are usually intrinsic, but they can be fluid. And to remind you, the percentages were 90% plus passive, around 5% are tops, masters make up under 1%, and slaves around 10% of subs in their lifetime. And of course, there would be a certain fluidity, and we'll go into that. On paper, this gives a huge imbalance. There's a gradient between submissive and dominant. Actually, in life, there often is. We like to think in the 21st century there's equality in relationships, but frequently there is not. And it's often intrinsic. And one of the attractions of BDSM is the formality of relationships in the modern world, the imbalance of power between he or she who controls and he or she who takes that control is blurred, usually in the Western world. We have a normative equality. This, ironically, of course, like everything, produces a reaction. There are many people who would like a much more formalized relationship with a dominant individual. And in BDSM, it's often ritualized. Many of the norms of yesterday, of, I don't know, the Roman Empire or even the Victorian period, when diffidence between masters and servants was normal. In fact, diffidence between people was normal. This is hankered after by people in BDSM. It's playing on a sexual gradient. It's making things explicit in a way which in so-called real life or social life is obscured. Of course, real life is very hierarchical. Most of us have bosses, and invariably there are people far richer than we are, far more powerful. We don't know them, and they have greater things at their command. So there is a reality, but people like to play with minutiae. But this is also something intrinsic. That's an intellectual playing with ideas, but BDSM plays with physical and psychological concepts of these ideas. So you actually do get tied up. You actually do experience erotic pain. But let's go have a look at what people are interested in, what those practices can be. And let's talk about the submissives. Back in 1999, I topped, that's the verb to top, 65 plus submissives to their scenes. A scene is an episode in BDSM. It's usually a few hours, can be a weekend, usually not much more. But the scene itself could be the thing they're into. Now, there isn't a material on earth which human beings, and possibly animals, certainly dogs and cats, don't find arousing. One can think of rubber, leather, silk, Even things like steel manacles, which on first reflection for most people would seem the most unerotic of things, become fetishized objects. They become sexually arousing in a certain form. A lump of iron may not be, but a manicure would have all the connotations of dungeons or ships or 100 other associations for an individual. So these objects themselves are eroticized, and we can also see this in a way in ordinary life, like with shoes and preferring to wear certain fabrics. We wouldn't necessarily associate it with a sexual urge or wishing to be tied up in it, but it's where the impulse comes from. It's not usually taught. These things are implicit. They're intuitive to an individual. Why does leather or rubber turn he or she on? Or why does certain stone floors have a certain taste, have a certain attraction for some people? Or